as we go through. So as usual, Rick and I will have kind of a conversational dialogue, probably for about 20 or 30 minutes, and then we'll open it up for questions as we see fit. I also want to just thank those of you that are here. As usual, we've got a really diverse group of participants from all over the country. I think, Rick, that shows us how much interest there is in this topic. I'm not going to dive way deep into Rick's bio, but I will say that Rick has a very unique background that makes him highly qualified to talk about the topic at hand from a lot of different angles. Currently, he's the Chief Operating Officer at Circuit of the Americas, otherwise known here around Austintown as COTA. And the Circuit of the Americas, among other things, obviously does Formula One racing, but does a variety of other races of all sorts, motocross and otherwise, hosts concerts, has a soccer or football team that plays there. So it's a multifaceted venue with a lot of different sports and entertainment activities. By way of background, Rick spent a good chunk of his career as the Vice President of Global Operations for ESPN. So we'll be able to dive into a little bit of detail about how some of the sports that have emerged early, like golf, for example, are handling bringing the experience to the fans. And I think Rick will have some really inside perspective on that. In fact, I'm going to lean into Rick. He guest lectures my class every semester, and he tells a fascinating story about his break into the Hall of Fame for broadcasting of some baseball work that he was doing, and happened to make a few good calls based on his ability to read a pitcher's moves. And it instantly won him access to the broadcast booth. So Rick, let's be sure to tell that story. He also was an executive director of the PGA Tour. And again, there's a lot more to his bio. I would urge you to Google it. Rick, let's just kick things off and maybe just give us the current state of play at COTA. I know you guys announced some news earlier this week. Maybe just kind of give us a state of where you are and kind of how you're seeing things.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate it. Christina, thank you for having me. Yeah, COTA is not unlike any other situation that you know that out there with people who are doing sports and entertainment. Our revenue is derived from bringing big races, big concerts, soccer matches, to COTA. So we're a 1,500 acre campus that has a Formula One track, and then we also have a 13,000 seat amphitheater, 5,000 seat soccer stadium. We're in the building a hotel and water park. So we have a huge campus, and all that can't function unless, we have people, leagues or races coming to COTA, or, Maroon 5, KISS, Alanis Morissette, they were all coming to COTA this year. And unfortunately, as you know, Live Nation has canceled all of their concert tours. So right now we're in the unenviable position of, trying to figure out where our revenue is going to be coming from for the remainder of this year. And then looking, in a very positive way towards 2021, we look to have a monster year, because all these concerts are going to want to come back out. We're going to have, 3 to 4 major races. The Rolling Stones will be here on Memorial Day weekend. So if you look forward, the road is bright and it's nice. Unfortunately, we got to weather the storm for the past 4 months and the next 6 months. And so it's an interesting time to be in the sports and entertainment industry, especially as a venue owner. And I think that's the key, because we don't own any of the leagues, or any of the races that come to us. So we're pretty beholden to, what they're doing as well.
So Rick, I think we have a pretty sophisticated audience that tunes into this, and a lot of them are sitting in chairs like yours, having to make these tough decisions. And I know they always benefit from kind of getting that inside perspective from another sport, and in your case, not just another sport. So talk a little bit about how you guys set yourselves up, at the very beginning of this crisis, to really kind of look at it and make the evaluations that you need to make every single day, week after week, month after month. What was the structure? What's the cadence? How have you organized, let's call it the situation room?
Yeah, no, that's a fair question. I mean, so, on, in early March when this whole thing was starting to tumble down and, games and leagues were starting to cancel, we immediately had to go into what are we going to do to, navigate this storm. And let's face it, I mean, nobody at that point in time understood how long this was going to last. So the one thing that I can honestly tell you that I guarantee a lot of people are doing, and I can honestly say it out loud, is that I am learning on a daily basis, not a weekly, not a monthly basis. Things change so rapidly right now with how decisions are made, how plans are made. I mean, look what happened yesterday with the Miami Marlins, and it's like now all of a sudden Major League Baseball's in a crisis mode trying to figure out how they're doing it. And so I can tell you that internally, to answer your question directly, communication is the key, right? Because right now employees are looking for leadership. And it is my job to make sure that I provide that all of our employees are communicated to, they understand, the challenges ahead of us, to be able to, calm their fears about certain aspects on, where their employment's going and what are we going to do with that, and everything. And then be as upfront and honest with them as we can about what's happening. I mean, to this point, we didn't know up until last week whether or not, Formula One was going to be coming, to COTA this year. And, Formula One is our Super Bowl, right? And we were hoping that it was going to come, but unfortunately they made the decision to forego North America and South America. So Montreal to Austin, Texas, Mexico City, and Brazil, all their races were canceled. And so it's unfortunate, but understanding from their point of view that, it costs a lot of money to be able to ship all those things, those containers and everything to all four of those. And let's be clear, while they all proximity-wise may all not be that far away from each other, we're talking about 4 different countries, right? And so all of those, things that you normally have to do, forget about COVID for a minute, just moving things in and out of countries. But now throw the quarantine time periods in. Where's the freight coming from? Where are all the people coming from? So this had nothing to do with whether or not we were going to be able to put fans in the stands. It had everything to do with the logistics and understanding what it was going to take and to take risks. Because in the end, which we can dive into a lot more as the conversation goes on, everybody is in risk mitigation mode at this point. It's trying to minimize that. And where are we going with it? So I guarantee you that had a huge reason why F1 decided, not to be with us.
So had it happened, had F1 come, you were going to do it without fans, I presume. Is that correct? Or were you?
Well, I mean, we don't know that, Jeff. You got it. Once again, going back to your question about planning, we were planning to have possibly 25% of the normal amount that we could fit here, which, if you're looking at our track and everything, could have been upwards of 30 to 40,000 people, because of how large our track is. And we could have easily put those people at a great social distancing apart from one another because of the advantage that we have of the way our berms are set up, our stands are set up, and everything. So we were planning on having fans, but we certainly, could have gone without them as well.
Yeah. And so were you already developing thinking around what you would do to deliver to the television audience the fan-like experience, and what was some of the thinking that was happening around that?
Yeah, we never reached that discussion with F1 at the time. I think what's happening with Major League Baseball right now is creative with the cutouts. I'm not a fan of the virtual fans in the stands that I forget which network was trying that.
Fox.
Fox. I think that you can manipulate it a little bit, but that went over the top a little bit. But hey, you know what? Kudos for them for trying.
Yeah.
And, because why not? The great thing that is coming out of this whole COVID situation is the networks are having the opportunity to throw something against the wall right now and not have it come back at them. Because everybody this is the time, if you had anything sitting in the file that, hey, do you want to give this a shot? Now's the time.
Yeah.
right? Because the audience is going to be incredibly forgiving. They're going to appreciate the effort to try to enhance the broadcast, right? Especially when your announcers are back at the home office, they're not even on site. So I think the networks right now are in a interesting position to be able to push technology.
Yeah. It's interesting. You talk about the decision-making process. We had the opportunity to speak with Jay Monahan from the PGA Tour, and he sort of took us in the tent for when they made that decision back at the Players to not play the second day. They started the tournament and then they stopped it. And he said, Jeff, it was really fascinating. We got together and it was probably, starting around 9 p.m. going till midnight. And ultimately, when we really got crystal clear in our thinking was when we revisited our core values and what we stood for. And he said, I've never seen a core set of values, a mission statement, be more instructive, to decision making than it was at that moment.
Yeah.
And it was kind of a sobering moment. The leadership team looked at that, and it was instantaneous. We knew what we had to do. And I'm just kind of curious if that's not the case with your team and your leadership, that you just have this sort of, these parameters that you think about the safety of your fans, your workers.
Sure. I mean, first of all, to comment on Jay, I've gotten a chance to get to know him when I was at the tour, and since then, very thoughtful leader. And I actually want to accentuate the point of leadership. I think that he is the type of person that walks the walk and is right there and answers questions and takes the hard questions and will talk to his athletes and make sure that they stay online and everything like that. So I appreciate Jay's transition into becoming commissioner and doing it so successfully in such a short amount of time. As it relates to the second half of that, it's about culture. Successful companies that are navigating this time period right now had a good culture in place prior to this situation. Companies that are struggling, I'm guessing, were struggling with culture prior to this whole thing hitting, because you can't all of a sudden become a change of a company in 1 month because of a crisis. Because when you're in the crisis mode, you have to revert back to the tenets of what made you great in the first place, and to what made the PGA Tour, as an example, great in the first place, is that they'd had a great mission statement, that they had great leadership. Now, for us with COTA, we pride ourselves on outstanding communication within the walls of this place, so that when we were forced to deal with this situation, it was nothing different than any other day for us in many ways, because we just knew that there was an expectation from our employees and our fans to communicate to them.
That's great. So I can't, resist the temptation to look at a few other sports, since you've got a pretty wide, portfolio. And you mentioned the Florida Marlins, and it struck me, and again, none of us wants to be armchair quarterbacking and second guessing, but it struck me that the commissioner of baseball was almost kind of taking a victory lap the day before the Marlins had all those players and one or two coaches test positive. And I know you can never, anticipate those things, but I guess what I would ask you is, what do you think the posture of leadership should be, even if you are able to kind of go forward?
First of all, I don't think that anybody in any circumstance, while 140,000 Americans have lost their lives, that anybody should be taking a victory lap on anything right now. And I'm not just putting that on the commissioner of baseball. I'm putting it on any governmental person, any league, any individual, thinking that they have solved the problem and that they should say to everybody else, look how we have handled this situation, is haphazard, in my opinion. There's no winning that, because the second that you go out and say that, look at the way we did it, look what happens the next day, right? And so, look, I didn't see what the commissioner had said the day before, and I don't want my comments to be construed that I am taking out, my opinion on him, because I think he's got an incredibly difficult job right now. But I'm just making an overall statement that I think that I would be very reserved right now in telling people that, look at us, we're doing it better than anybody else?
Yeah, I think in general, there's a tendency to want to be optimistic and to want to be encouraging. And I think if you look across these sports, they're hearing directly from their fans who want baseball back, who want golf back. So I think it's a natural tendency, to want to be optimistic. But I think one of the things that we've learned is that, as you said at the very beginning, this is so dynamic and it changes daily. I mean, for all intents and purposes, 6 weeks ago, Austin, Texas was not a hot spot. Texas was being held up as some great, model in Texas and Florida. And then boom, turn the corner and we're the hot spot. And you've got a whole different set of issues and circumstances that you're having to deal with.
Right. I promise that nobody really understands what's going on behind the scenes than the people who are in it. So much speculation about, oh, the Marlins should be doing this, the Phillies should be doing that, and baseball should be doing all these different things. You guys, I'm going to tell you right now, I mean, sure, that's what makes our lives great in this, world of sports and this, this petri dish we're in and that we all choose to be in. And I don't want to be in any other place. I love it. And there's times that I'm in there and I deserve the scrutiny that I may be giving right now. But I'm going to tell you right now that we don't know exactly the conversations that are going on in the Marlins clubhouse right now. And then between Major League Baseball, you're going to hear, leaks and things like that. But those are typically around the edge of what's really happening.
Right.
Well, I think everyone should take a step back before you cast too much of a shadow on somebody when, they're doing it.
So everybody, kind of wants to, understand and hope and pray for what might be coming with regard to college football.
Yeah.
NFL too, but I think college football really
Sure.
kind of touches on the heartland. Just
I agree.
based on where we're sitting here today,
Yes.
as we look at the world as we know it today, what do you see happening? What do you think
I
could be
don't-
possible?
I don't know how you go back and play if your students aren't in school, So the NFL is its own animal. It's its own business. It's a professionally run business. College is completely different. They are students first, athletes second. And anybody who wants to argue that, I'll be more than happy to do that. That they are there to go to school and they happen to be playing football. Now, I know that everybody will say it's a complete difference and they want to get into the money that the players draw and all that different things, but it's not. It's an institution. They are there for higher learning. And even though they do give a ton of deference to the football teams, I guarantee you that university presidents and chancellors right now are making a decision on the entire student body, not just the football players, right? Because they know that they will come under scrutiny if they have one set of rules for football and another set of rules for everybody else, right? And so it'll be interesting to kind of see what happens. Hey, look, I want to see college football and my University of Minnesota Gophers, coming off and have PJ Fleck, rowing the boat. I'm in. I want to see it, right? Big Ten football is appointment viewing for me every Saturday. But I will tell you, with what we're seeing, boy, you better make sure that you think it's hard right now corralling baseball players. I think the NBA and the NHL, what great news out of the NHL today that none of their players have tested positive, right? And they're not even in the Canadian bubble right now yet. That was awesome news to hear that, right? And I think that's good for all sports, by the way, right? Now, to go back, I doubt that if Bettman's going to run around and take a victory lap on that because he knows better, right? And so it'll be interesting to see kind of what happens. But back to college football, they've got a lot more to worry about than what professional sports have got to worry about.
Yeah, no doubt. I guess right now we're seeing signs that most of them have already made the decision to play conference-only schedules.
Yeah.
I guess
I think you're going to see that massaged a little bit.
Yeah.
SEC has decided not to do that. I think the Big Ten got out ahead of themselves a little, and so did the Pac-10. I wouldn't be surprised to see that, because if you're only playing 9 conference games, what's really at risk is the bowl games.
Yeah.
Bowl games. I think that's going to be interesting, especially if everything starts getting pushed back. I mean, the good thing is, we're talking about, they're pretty fluid as far as being able to, you don't have to play the Rose Bowl on New Year's Day. You can play it on February. But the point is that it'll be interesting, because not every one of those places is in a warm weather site.
Yeah. So coming back to COTA, and you've got a you've got a very diverse range of constituents, sports fans, entertainment fans.
Yeah.
So, and you're now not able to touch them, with an event or an activity. So what's the thinking that's going on with you and your marketing teams, for example, about how to stay engaged with these people so that they know that you're still here and that you love them and that you look forward to welcoming them back? How are you keeping that connection? Yeah,
it's difficult. I mean, because a lot of places are trying to figure that out, we're so event driven, so people come to us, they have an experience, and let's face it, their experience at COTA, while we are the forward facing of it, and that our brand has to deal with their experience here. A lot of it has to do with what is going on the track, on the stage, on the pitch. And then we manage around that. So, all we can do at this point in time is to be a realistic, voice of, we'll be here when everything comes back. I'm not really sure what else you can promise right now, and you certainly can't promise a date. And I would definitely not ever get into the business of ever putting a date out there when we're promising to do something, because right now, until a vaccine is created, I'm not really sure how anybody's going to be able to do that. So, you've got to at some point look at a date into the future where you're going to have that first concert or that first race. So how far forward? I mean, we've scheduled already MotoGP and IndyCar for next year. And yes, you have to put a line in the sand or a stake in the sand, however you want to put it, and to be able to say that. And sure, you can point yourself towards that. So Jeff, you're right about that. And concert tours are starting to book dates already for next year, because you got to do that. You got to plan and everything. My comments were more around, trying to say, we promise we're going to do X. Right. We can say, here's our schedule, best laid plans, this is where we're going to be. But short of, I think, like I've used the word earlier, I think it's haphazard to go out there and start telling everybody the world's going to be great after the first of the year. Right. Now, there is a lot of hope that we're getting closer to a vaccine. There's multiple candidates, and they're also making advances with the therapies. Yep. So that's all good news. And I think in general, people want to be optimistic that, first quarter of next year, we're going to see a different picture, God willing. Yeah. So right now, you would say that, when is the MotoGP due to come to? It's going to be in April. April. So you're at least looking at April, some normalcy of activity. Anything before April? Nothing before April? As of right now, let me look at my board real fast. Actually, I apologize, March. IndyCar and Moto will be in March. I'm sorry. Okay. And so those are big. That's a big month for us. They're 2 weeks apart. Yeah. And that's for my team, that's a really interesting 4-week stretch. Yeah. Having 2 completely different race series here, one with the motorcycles, and then bring, open wheel racing to COTA, which is exactly what it was built for. Yeah. So, one of the questions, without getting into the specifics of your organization or your operation, because I know there's some of this information that's confidential for obvious reasons, but sure. A lot of organizations have had to let people go. They've either furloughed them or they've just let them go. And then some organizations, and I think your organization has a little bit of this, where you have a lot of flexible resources, right? By design. Right. So, I guess one of the things that is kind of curious to me is, if you're looking at a March, date, at some point you've got to kind of ramp up, right? Yes.
meaning you got to bring some resources, flexible or otherwise, in.
No, I mean, and to let's back it up. As you started this conversation with Formula One, I was on the phone creating and figuring out who could be here work-wise, the last weekend in October, up until this past week when the event got canceled. So, we bring in close to 3,500 workers for that weekend. And so you just can't turn that spigot on, the day, the week before and say, hey, everybody, please show up. There's a ton of planning and training and everything that goes with that. So now obviously that number comes way down if there's no fans and the amount of fans. But to your point about planning, we were thinking we were going to have more people here because of the amount of people to be able to space them out properly, make them feel comfortable, make sure that, we had plenty of PPE around for everybody, to be able to, to feel as if that we've created a safe zone for them to watch the race, and enjoy the weekend and grab something to eat, grab something to drink. We still want, the core cornerstones of coming to a race to try to have some semblance of, of being able to enjoy, the reason why they were here. But yes, I mean, we keep on a normal 365, we have a base group and then we balloon up, then come back down, balloon up, come back down on all of our races. Or, if we have 35 concerts, we go up and down every single week. We don't carry that, head count, on our bottom line. It's an event-driven head count.
Gotcha. So I guess, can't resist the temptation since you've worked across sports to get a little commentary from you on how you think, for example, the PGA Tour is doing, with golf and the way they brought it back to us. And I mean, maybe we can talk a bit more about baseball, but you mentioned Jay Monahan, and I'm just kind of curious in your views on how the golf experience is presenting itself to us today.
Yeah, I think that if you were to ask people at CBS how they think they're doing today versus the first broadcast in Fort Worth, I think that they would say they have gotten 100% better.
Yeah.
The cadence between Jim Nantz and Faldo being, in completely different states and doing what they do. I do want to comment on technology, as I brought that up earlier. And as you know, there was the conversation going on about trying to mic the players during the event, albeit whatever comes out, because they have the parabolic mics that already catch the conversation, so they probably didn't need to be mic'd up directly and everything. But I see this from the athlete point of view as well. Not every athlete feels like as if they're on a cooking show and they're going to show you the recipe for how they cook their dinner, and then, or to make it actually really relevant, they feel like they're calling their shot. They're going to say, okay, I'm going to take this 7-iron, I'm going to hit it 165 yards, it's going to be within, I'm going to roll it back. They don't need that.
Right.
More pressure and more timing about doing everything. Mickelson did it a couple of times in the match, and I have to admit, the couple of times he did it, he nailed exactly what he was saying to do. And I go, the risk reward there is so high.
Yeah.
This is exactly what I'm going to do. And then he does that bump and run shot on that one chip shot. And I sat back and I go, he needs more credit than he's getting for exactly doing what he called. And I would not want to be a golfer taking 65 strokes and calling every one of my shots.
Yeah.
So,
by the way, having played with you, I wouldn't want you to do it either.
Yeah. No, and by the way, that's probably like 95 shots. Certainly not 65. But then, but going back to CBS, that's not CBS's fault.
Yeah.
CBS is trying to, get the viewer as close as possible. I'd like to see more drones being used in golf. I think that they give interesting perspective of everything that's going there and that. Going to baseball, which is my favorite sport. You know what? The baseball guys are used to calling games, in booths and kind of and doing that. And I think they're actually doing a great job. I'm really fond of Joe Buck and his call at Fox, and with Smoltz and everything. I think that they're the two best baseball announcers in the field right now. I enjoyed watching their game on Saturday. Too bad it was a blowout.
Yeah.
And everything, because they're great when it's a close game.
Yeah.
Baseball's a storytelling sport as it is.
Yeah.
So if you already have the ability to tell stories during match or during games and all that, you don't necessarily have to be sitting right behind home plate to do it.
Yeah.
And so I applaud baseball for jumping into the way they have, because I got to tell you, no fans in the stands is energyless.
Yes.
And they've got to create that. And so far, I think baseball's really nailed it.
You know, you and I were talking in prepping for today about that first match play with Tom Brady and Mickelson and Tiger, and we were talking about how we kind of got to see a side of Tom Brady that we don't get to see, and it was very fascinating. I mean, you saw him really losing confidence because he couldn't hit a shot. Yeah. And then he hits that, he hits the shot that matters, right?
Yep.
And sort of brings him back. And you could just see his whole attitude change.
Well, what's funny of the four athletes, he's the one that has been the least in the public about what he does and how he does it comparatively to the other three.
Right.
Especially now that Peyton has left the game.
Yeah.
And I'm sure he was frustrated that he had to continue to kind of talk it out, and have everybody kind of feel his pain of struggling. Then to your point, he drains that one chip. And then next thing you know, the Tom Brady we all have seen and admire comes out. He takes that win and he doubles down, triples down, quadruple downs it. And then the guy is like off to the races.
Yeah. Even smack talking.
Exactly. So it's so funny to watch somebody that's that great, have a little loss of confidence, but then regain it, so quickly and then run with it.
Yeah. By the way, I have not been able to tune into a baseball game yet, I regret to say, but I'm going to tune in.
You got to do that.
Yeah, I've been kind of reading and watching and hearing, but I'm an Astros fan, and I guess in some respects they're catching a break because,
Well, hang on now. They're playing the Dodgers.
Yeah.
I think it's tomorrow.
Right.
ESPN,
that's on TV. That's right.
Yeah, ESPN's got that, on their triple header tomorrow. It'll be interesting to see if there's any smack talking going on between those two.
Yeah, and how they pipe in and sound.
Yep.
What they pipe in. One of my friends says, as long as we can hear the garbage can.
Yeah.
But,
I think it'll be interesting to see how it's dealt with, because the Dodgers were very vocal that we're going to deal with it on the field.
Yeah.
Oh, they've had a lot of time to kind of cool their jets.
Yeah.
And see if it actually transpires or not.
Yeah. I mean, it'll be I don't think it'll be a good thing for the game if we start seeing people throwing,
No, it never is.
No.
It never is. I understand, and trust me, I played baseball my entire life. I'm a huge baseball fan. I played professionally. I enjoy it. And I just don't – I think it gets starting in and out of hands when you start taking people's careers into, to either hitting them, and then it gets really serious when pitchers start, throwing the ball above the shoulder blades. We're talking about lives.
Yeah. That's a lethal weapon.
It is, especially coming in at 95 miles an hour.
Exactly. Well, Rick, I think we've kind of come to the end of the discussion that I wanted to have with you. I don't know if we, from the group out there, I think we've had a couple of questions that have come in. Christina, do you want to pose any questions that have come in from the outside?
Yeah, sure. One I think is great is, what are some ways that organizations can reimagine their offerings to continue to engage audiences during these times? Like, are there any good examples you've seen? Are there any bad examples, kind of taking what you've got and making it work with the situation at hand?
Yeah, Christina, I think that, what we talked about a little bit earlier, which is the attempt to do something. If you do the same old thing, if all the networks would have come back and just showed a normal broadcast and made no changes and didn't try, and not just acknowledging that COVID is around and everything that's going on, but try to push the envelope on some things. Like I said, I'm a firm believer that the viewer right now, more than ever, at least in my lifetime, is extremely forgiving on trying something. they're going to say, well, that was an attempt, let's move on and stuff like that, because it's not at all, going to affect anything in the long run, because I think if anything, they'll be applauded for, trying something new. And this is not just the broadcasters. I think teams should be doing that. Everybody has the opportunity to almost have a free pass to try something kind of new. And who knows? I mean, something kind of wonky and then it sticks and next thing you know, you hit a home run.
Yeah, I think that's a great perspective. I think the smart people are really innovating right now like never before. It's forcing some new thinking, and that's great. Good question, by the way. Anybody else, Christina?
One is pretty granular and specific, but I think really applies to you, Rick, in terms of events. I guess what considerations go into whether an event is completely canceled or just delayed or kind of postponed? What's the thinking behind that?
Right. I think that we're more in the mode of cancellations than postponements. I think early in March and April, the world of postponements was there because of the uncertainty of if this thing was going to have an end date to it, right? The NFL had they themselves admitted that they said this. They came out and said, hey, we have, the luxury of time because they don't start till September, or a preseason game at the time in August. And this was March. And then all of a sudden we kept marching forward, going forward. And now all of a sudden they ran out of time. So they had to deal with what everybody else dealt with 3 months ago. They did have the luxury, I shouldn't say luxury because that's the wrong word. They did have the perspective that they got to see what everybody else was working on. However, what's going to be interesting is that now the players are reporting to camp and they're starting to do things. Everyone's going to look to the NFL for a leadership position here because they look to the NFL for a leadership position in almost everything. And so if the NFL ever thought that they were under the microscope, this is going to be at times 100.
Well, and they also have the whole Black Lives Matter, that all is coming, and they've got to figure out how they're going to let players express themselves. And I mean, I think they've kind of figured it out, and we're going to see when the season opens, but that's also another thing that's coming their way.
I agree.
Well, Rick, I just want to thank you again. This has been a great conversation. Exciting times ahead. You get a pretty broad purview, both in sports and entertainment, and we're all pulling for you and pulling for COTA. We want to get back out there, and thanks again for taking the time to be with us today. And Godspeed, and get that track open.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate it. Christina, thanks for your time. Everybody out there, please stay safe. That's the most important thing. Take care of your families.
Yeah, thank you.